There's a type of person who sees a group chat lighting up about plans this weekend and quietly hopes they won't be invited. Not because they're sad, not because they're anxious, and not because they dislike people. They simply feel better when they're on their own. That preference is often misunderstood. It's labeled as loneliness, avoidance, or emotional distance. But psychology makes an important distinction here. Being alone is not the same thing as feeling lonely. Loneliness is a state of distress. It's what happens when connection is missing but still needed. Being alone, on the other hand, can be a deliberate and regulating choice. Some people don't withdraw from others because something is wrong. They do it because solitude gives them something they don't easily find elsewhere. Psychologists describe this as a preference for solitude, not antisocial behavior, which involves hostility, not avoidance, which is driven by fear, but a calm inclination toward time spent alone because it restores balance. When researchers began looking more closely at people with this preference, they noticed something unexpected. These individuals weren't struggling more. In many cases, they were emotionally stable, reflective, and highly self-regulated. To understand why, we have to look at how different people process stimulation. Some nervous systems are built to handle a lot of external input. Conversation, movement, shared attention, and social energy help them feel alive and balanced. Other nervous systems are more sensitive. They register input quickly. Noise, expectations, and constant interaction build up faster. For these people, even enjoyable social time can become mentally expensive. Not bad, just costly. Solitude allows the system to settle, and this isn't about disliking people. It's about how quickly the mind reaches its optimal level of engagement. Without competing input, the brain naturally shifts inward. Reflection deepens. Thoughts organize themselves. Emotions become easier to read. That's why people who love being alone often describe their clearest thinking happening in ordinary moments. Albert Einstein once noted that many of his most important insights came not during lectures or meetings, but while he was alone, walking, daydreaming, or quietly thinking through problems without interruption. Solitude gave his mind the space to connect ideas that constant stimulation would have drowned out. While washing dishes, during a quiet walk, late at night when no one is waiting for a reply. The hands are busy, the mind is free. It's like closing unnecessary browser tabs. Once the background noise drops, the system runs more smoothly. This is also why people who prefer solitude often have a rich inner world. Their mind isn't a place they escape from. It's a place they return to. Ideas, memories, questions, and observations have room to unfold. Silence doesn't feel empty. It feels spacious. Because of that, they tend to value depth over volume. They don't need constant stimulation or frequent reassurance. Instead, they gravitate toward fewer, more meaningful interactions. They're not collecting social experiences, they're choosing them. This often gets mistaken for emotional distance. But psychologically, it's closer to self-sufficiency. People who enjoy being alone are often comfortable sitting with their emotions instead of immediately outsourcing them. They don't need constant feedback to know how they feel. They've learned to regulate internally. You can see this in how they handle boredom. Where others instinctively reach for their phone, they can sit with the quiet a little longer. They might read a book, stare out a window, or take a slow walk with no destination. Silence isn't threatening, it's stabilizing. Because of that, their relationships often feel less strained. They're not seeking others to fill gaps or soothe discomfort. They connect from a place of clarity rather than need. Time alone becomes a reset. Like stepping out of a crowded room into fresh air, solitude lowers the background hum. Thoughts untangle, emotions soften. Nothing needs to be fixed. Things simply return to baseline. And when they return to others, they do so with more patience, attention, and presence. A modern example many people recognize is Keanu Reeves. Despite decades of global fame, he's known for living quietly, riding the subway, walking alone, spending long stretches out of the spotlight. Not because he dislikes people, but because he's repeatedly described how privacy helps him stay grounded and emotionally steady. In his case, solitude isn't about isolation. It's about protecting a sense of self in a world that constantly demands access. Different cultures interpret this differently. In many parts of East Asia, spending time alone is quietly normalized. Single-seat cafes, solo meals, long walks in public parks, being alone doesn't automatically invite explanation. In many Western social environments, solitude is often treated with suspicion. Eating alone raises questions. Skipping group plans is seen as avoidance. Quiet time is sometimes mistaken for withdrawal. But cultural expectations don't define psychological health. What matters is how solitude feels on the inside. Psychology makes an important distinction here. Healthy solitude feels expansive. It leaves you clearer than before. Protective solitude feels constricting. It narrows your world instead of restoring it. The behavior may look the same from the outside. The internal experience is different. People who benefit from solitude often build small, intentional rituals around it. A nightly walk, a few minutes of journaling, a quiet check-in at the end of the day. One well-known example comes from Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. Despite ruling an empire, he kept a disciplined daily routine that included time spent alone, writing privately about his thoughts, fears, and reactions. What we now know as meditations was never meant to be published. It was a form of personal regulation, a nightly check-in to examine his inner state, regain clarity, and return to the world with steadier judgment. For him, solitude wasn't withdrawal. It was maintenance. A way of responding deliberately instead of being pulled around by everything happening outside. That's how healthy solitude usually works. It isn't dramatic, it's deliberate. Psychology doesn't ask you to change your preference, it asks you to understand it. Some people restore through interaction, others restore through quiet. Neither is better, they're simply different nervous systems doing what they do best. If you're someone who enjoys being alone, you're not opting out of life. You're choosing the conditions where you function best. And that isn't distance, it's self-knowledge.